Hey, just a quick note to say thank you for joining me on this episode. If this is your first time or you're a regular listener, please take a minute and rate the show on your chosen platform. A short review helps every show to be more visible to new listeners and provides them with value. So, thank you for being here and for helping out. Thank you.
I need to capture how our lives are evolving. So that was the first point. And it was like, okay, how can I document daily life? So that was the beginning. And the second one was that in the work that I do, most times you see people as consumers of or users of, and which that's great. I also wanted to look at life without filters. So rather than going on a mission for Nike or IKEA or Google or around the world, looking at the world through their eyes, I just wanted to look at the world through the eyes of what it's like being a chef, a baby, a geisha, a cowboy. See the new narratives that emerge when you see life that way. Normally in the world of marketing and market research, you kind of believe your own narrative sometimes. And you see the world as people that buy your narrative and people that are rejectors of your narrative. 150 brands come together in your life and
Welcome to the Daring Creativity Podcast, a show about daring to forever explore creativity that isn't about chasing shiny perfection. It's about showing up with all your doubts and imperfections and making them count. It's about becoming more of who you already are. My name is Radim Malinic. I'm a designer, author, and eternally curious human being. I'm talking to a broad range of guests who share their stories of small actions that sparked lifetime discoveries, taking one step towards the thing that made them feel most alive. Let me begin this episode with a question. Are you ready to discover what happens when you dare to create? Today I'm talking to Paula Zuccotti, a multi-hyphenated creative who transformed from industrial designer to design ethnographer to future archaeologist. Born in Buenos Aires, she moved to London on a British Council scholarship and spent 12 years at Seymour Power before launching her groundbreaking project, Everything We Touch. This unique documentary project photographs every single object a person touches in one day, from walking to sleeping, creating powerful visual stories that reveal hidden truths about how we live. Paula has captured more than 100 people's days across the globe, from cowboys to geishas, 2-year-olds to indigenous hunters. Her work emerges from childhood observation to her grandmother's different lifestyles and evolves into a method for understanding human behavior, cultural shifts, and societal changes. It's my pleasure to introduce Paula Zuccotti. Hey Paula, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
very good, Radim. Thank you so much for having me here.
What you do is truly unique, and your story, your work, your social connections, your way of working is super unique. So for those who may have never heard of you, how would you introduce yourself?
Thank you for that intro. I'm Paula Zuccotti. I'm a designer originally, an industrial designer, become ethnographer, trends forecaster, strategist, and I work at the intersection of anthropology, art, and culture. So I'm kind of like an evolution of one thing after the other one. So I don't know what the end result is there. And I don't know if it's like designer plus ethnography plus that or slash, to be honest. But I'm happy with what it is now.
I think they call it multi-hyphenated creative. I think there's this beautiful part that we can be whatever we want to be these days. And I think, as you say, I don't know where I'm going, but it's the eternal curiosity that's taking you from one thing to another, because we do still live in a world that likes to put labels on people, like who are you, do the one thing, or how do you explain yourself? Whereas I think having a problem sometimes explain yourself what you do is a good problem to have. So from your accent, people can sort of potentially guess that you're from South America. You were born in Buenos Aires. And I do have the habit going back to the beginnings a little bit. So what is the making of multi-hyphenated designer that now lives in London?
I was born in Buenos Aires. I studied industrial design there. And then I had the opportunity to apply for a postgraduate, a master's degree in the UK and through the British Council. So I applied, I won that scholarship. I came here. I think I spent half of my life in Buenos Aires and half here, although if you tell me I'm 100% Argentinian, but a Londoner, if that's something. And so I did a master's in design strategy and innovation, which got me into working at one of the London's best product design and innovation consultancies called Powell. I started working there after my master's, and I worked there for 12 years, and I became the head of research and director of futures at the company, looking after everything that had to do with the creation of new products and services, inspiring that vision through the lens of human behavior, culture, and trends. I worked there for 12 years, and then I left 12 years ago to set up my own business and creative practice. So yes, that's kind of like I'm where I am now. In a 12 years working independently as a small business.
Love it. What are the makings of industrial design in Argentina? What was the surroundings that got you intrigued, curious about product design?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think I studied product design because I wasn't sure if I wanted to study architecture or graphic design. And somehow in the middle, looking at the careers, I was like, oh, industrial design is something in between. I mean, it's a bit of a naive view, no? No an architect or graphic designer would agree with that today. But I went into a world that I did not know. I think like I wanted to study something that I knew nothing about. I went to a business school. My parents were in banking and economics. And so I jumped into a new world. And I think that is really scary at the start, but always being in a place where you are like, in Spanish, we have a phrase that is called sapo de otro pozo, which is like a frog from another pond. Like it's a bit silly, but it is that idea. So the making of an industrial designer there, I went to the public state university, which is kind of like one of the best in the country. And it makes really resourceful, smart people as a result. You know, you study with great teachers in great environments with no resources, no financial support, in very bare class conditions. I'm talking like 20, 25 years ago. And it creates, I mean, that scarcity and willing to study and thrive makes a really great community of people coming out of it. So it's a long degree there. It's like a 5 years degree compared to here in the UK that it could be like 3 to 4. So you do go through from engineer to conceptual to visual. It's good all rounded.
You're not my first Argentinian guest, but you're my second Argentinian guest to tell me the story how the education in Argentina was pivotal to their life, because you said I learned from great people, and I had Ezekiel Abramson on the show on the previous season, and he was very much talking about like how top illustrators, top designers were teaching them, or they were their professors at the university, and you're like, how do you do that? To me, the cross between architecture and graphic design makes perfect sense. That is product design, isn't it? I mean, that is a beautiful way of actually that how you marry those two worlds. Because, yeah, the world you didn't know, it's that philosophy follows you pretty much till today.
Yeah, I like that. I like that view. Yes, again, when I came to England, I came to the master's degree. And again, I was like from another world. I've always felt, and I'm always like having a start at places where I'm like shy and observant, and I try to figure out my voice in that new place. And I don't walk into a new place loud, if you know what I mean. I'm kind of like trying to find how do I and my views and myself connect to that. What's the best intersection between myself and that place? And I think that applies to projects, to collaborating in group teams, or yes, studying or coming up with, see, how do I connect, or giving a talk somewhere. When I give a talk, the first 5 minutes, I'm kind of like probably a little bit nervous. I don't even have time to prepare it because I'm giving the talk actually at the moment. But it's finding that connection between you and the audience and the place. And I think when I find that, I feel the most comfortable and I can fly in there. So I think it takes a while.
It's really interesting when you say shy and kind of taking it all in from the sidelines, because it's usually the giveaway of someone's feeling of inferiority or someone's sort of need to assert themselves in the situations that we, they, them become loud on purpose just to assert themselves and make sure that they get seen. It's almost like that hierarchy of the people in the room. Whereas personally, like seeing things from the sidelines and actually not necessarily being the first person that needs to speak, when you give yourself time to an opportunity to understand and observe, you're always going to make a better first step. Because your next step is going to be much more informed rather than the one saying like, am I here? Am I here for the right reason? Am I doing this? Because we got similar stories. I mean, I've been in the UK pretty much the same amount of time as you. And I remember coming here on a slightly different mission. You were coming to study masters. I came here record shopping and just enjoy the culture. What was it like for you? Because you said you were here with the sort of scholarship from English Council. Going into the unknown, did you have many expectations? Did you go with eyes open wide? Did you ever doubt it? That was the right decision?
No, never doubted. I didn't know that I was going to come and stay, by the way. I was coming for 1 year, but that's what it happens. No, I was kind of full of expectations, but also expectations with no boundaries. I didn't have the low and the high. I just had the enthusiasm of what I was going to do with myself with this opportunity. And during when I was doing the master's degree, and I'll do this little bracket to tell you this because it has to do with what I ended up doing for a living. I came across an article on a magazine, and it was Viewpoint magazine, that talked about design ethnography. And it was a complete new term. I'm talking 2000, the year 2000. Nobody was talking about, and it was like a really new methodology that companies like Apple, Xerox, Intel in Palo Alto were sending anthropologists to what at the time they considered to be other cultures. So, instead of designing from America to the world with an American mentality, they would send anthropologists to what they consider farther afield, like Far East Asia or Africa or Latin America, to study culture, to learn how people live, to then inform the design process. And I read that during the master on that openness on an article, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I would love to do in a way. I wasn't an anthropologist. I wasn't that person. I wasn't working for any of those companies. But I was like, this is everything that I like. I like product design. I like culture. I like people. I like traveling. I like immersing myself in the life of others. So when I had the opportunity of doing a placement at Seymour Powell, which then became my 12 years job, I pitched the idea of bringing that method and design ethnography. I said, look, I will learn about this during my master's. I write my dissertation on it, and I'll come back here and I can stay and develop this for you. So it was a winning situation because I got to create that in the context of industrial design and innovation consultancy, not necessarily, like the Palo Alto companies. So that was the beginning.
I would say, I mean, in the concept of daring creativity or daring forever, you've created, through your curiosity, you've created your future role, because reading about design ethnography and being excited about it, obviously you started joining dots together. I like that you could see that future there because you're already thinking about design process differently, to my opinion, as a graphic designer or an architect. You're in this Venn diagram bubble on your own thinking, I'm going to join all of these curiosities, all of these ideas and all of these visions and wants in a way. So where does your curiosity come from? How do we join these dots together? Because you've created your own future based on something that was inside.
I think what I always did as a child, I would say, observe, like I would just, I don't know, I love just seeing people doing stuff, and that's what I do today. But to the point that I was an only child growing up. Now I got siblings now, but I was an only child growing up. And I also spent a lot of time with my grandmothers that were looking after me in a very kind of quiet environment. Can you imagine, like grandmother and me, only child? Beautiful relationships, but very silent, very quiet, very contemplative, And I think that gave me a lot of time in my head and to think. It's like looking at things and processing and coming up with my own ideas. I remember I used to observe my grandmother doing things like folding wrapping paper and just like little acts or the way that she stored food in the fridge. And then I end up doing that for companies, helping them create better packaging. But it is that kind of like observations of how I used to remember, I have one of my grandmothers was really simple and austere, and she didn't surround herself with objects, and the other one could have even like a sanctuary on her bedside table of little saints and things. And just observing, had two different lifestyles. They were like very similar people with a very similar background, but they lived really differently. And I don't know, I remember observing that and making something of it. What do I see of that? What is that telling me about my grannies in a different way? So that became, I think, when I realized that ethnography was the connector of all of that, and I could apply that to informing the design process by looking at those insights of how we do things. That was the connector. I don't know. I never thought about it when I just told you now. But I did think about my grannies before in that way, but not in that.
That's why you're here, to join the dots, because...
Thank you for the questions, by the way.
No. This is interesting because I'm already getting the hints of where we're heading with your story of you watching your grandmother folding paper, wrapping paper, doing things.
It's just the way we did things. My granny and I used to phone a telephone number like 113 to figure out the weather and all of those things, and how technology changed those things. I mean, it's fascinating from a kind of behavior point of view of what we do every day.
So you've done 12 years with Seymour Powell. You had a beautiful title of Head of Researches and Head of Futures. That feels like an empowering job title, then potentially comes with lots of responsibility, like Head of Futures, like no pressure, go, tell us. And then you went on your own. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is because you got this fascinating project called Everything We Touch. I didn't really think much about this concept, only in passing when I had someone called Björn Kosowski on this show, who's a Swedish designer who happened to have an album cover or singles cover designed by Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol was apparently famous for creating time capsules. Apparently Andy Warhol pretty much took everything every year and put it in a box and put it away and started again. And me and Björn obviously got chatting about books and sort of what we do as creatives and how we put stuff together. Whereas what you do, you've taken a whole of like the concept of time capsules and twisted that concept on its head and created something so fascinating that it fills me with so much curiosity and so much intrigue, because as another observer of humanity, don't go to the gallery if you want to see how people behave. Watch them on a high street. That's my mantra. You've created something which is utterly fascinating. So I want to know, where did the idea of Everything We Touch come from, and how is it taking us till today?
Yeah, well, for Everything We Touch, the concept is tell the story of someone by showing a day in their lives. So with Everything We Touch, I photograph every single thing that a person touches in a single day of their life, from waking up to going to sleep. And I have done this. I published it as a book in 2015, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years. So the idea is, can we tell someone's life by just looking at all the objects that they touch in one day? And what will that picture tell me about them and about us and about our society? And it is so revealing. And because in this world where we associate ourselves to a selfie or a curated side of our personality, where you may say, oh, Paula, what are your favorite 5 things? And I will come with my best t-shirt, record player, my best book, and my jewelry. I don't know. But Everything We Touch is like an X-ray of your life, because it is everything you do in 24 hours. So while you may have your favorite t-shirt on, you also touch a Tupperware and cling film and house keys and medicine and a bottle of wine. And it's kind of like everything that you need in a day to live, survive, have fun, express yourself, cope, work out. It's just a really good unit, if I may say. I had to come up with a unit in order to tell these life experiences. So that's the story. So I photograph people on their everyday lives. And everyday lives goes back to my studies as an ethnographer, when I studied everyday life. And sorry, I felt that I needed to explain what Everything We Touch was before telling you where it came from. Again, going back to the life as designer, as an ethnographer, I've been working on the design of products, from the conceptual and vision point of view since 2000. So I got to work on design of TVs, remote controls, speakers, mobile phones for companies like, Nokia, LG, Samsung. And those products are not here anymore, many of them. they were disappearing, becoming obsolete in our lives. When I was researching this in 2002, we had 4 remote controls in our TV rooms. We had a set-top box, we had a digital box, we had the VHS, we had the DVD, we had a hi-fi. And so I'm seeing the changes working on this field for these sort of clients since 2000. I think things change. And I was thinking, I need to capture this. I need to capture how our lives are evolving. So that was the first point. And it was like, okay, how can I document daily life? So that was the beginning. And the second one was that in the work that I do, most times you see people as consumers of or users of, and which that's great. I also wanted to look at life without filters. So rather than going on a mission for Nike or IKEA or Google or around the world, looking at the world through their eyes, I just wanted to look at the world through the eyes of what it's like being a chef, a baby, a geisha, a cowboy. See the new narratives that emerge when you see life that way. Normally, in the world of marketing and market research, you kind of believe your own narrative sometimes. And you see the world as people that buy your narrative and people that are rejectors of your narrative. So I just wanted to see what happens when 150 brands come together in your life and you're not carrying the flag of any of them. So that was the second, more rebellious point in a way.
Right. I want to know, when did the first picture photograph collection came together? Who was your breakthrough? Who was the first person? Did you come up with the format straight away, or did you adapt it a few times before you settled?
The breakthrough was my best friend, Clarissa, and she's Argentinian too. And we used to live nearby. And she happened to have a shed studio in her backyard. And her husband, her ex-husband now, was a photographer. So not having thought about that he was a photographer, that was like, oh my God, and we can also do this. So the first point was like, I was telling her, I have this idea. And she was like, that's amazing. And I was like, but who in earth, who is going to lend themselves to this experiment with me? How am I going to convince people to keep a record of everything they touching one day? How is this going to happen? And she was like, I'll do it. And I was like, really? I'll do it for you. So we did it together. And I remember she was going through, we set a day that we were going to record everything that she touched. And it was beautiful, like she was taking her daughters to school to tap dancing lessons. It's the uniforms, it's everything. Is her day, it's her gym class, it's her going out, it's the restaurant she went to. And I remember she was like, but Pau, the mailman just came and I used a pen to sign an envelope yes, I want that. And my hairband that I touched in the morning, the first thing before I touched toilet paper, and yes, that goes to, and the clean film. And we started to realize the power on those little things that you don't think about, but they are necessary to your everyday. So we did it together, and then it was like, okay, we need to get all the things. And we used her husband's shed, her ex Jake, who also taught me how to do a photo as such, because yes, I was, taking photos, but not to that level of how technical it is. So it was an amazing serendipity that Jake was there to lend me a hand. So we did the first photo. He helped me and we couldn't work it out. It was just so complex when you photograph objects from above. So we got there, but then I started to investigate and find out how could I do it better, how could I because we weren't able to connect the camera to our phones or anything like that. So we were just trying to hold the camera above while not being ourselves in the shot. Well, anyway, so the system and kept improving. The second one was my husband. I had like really nice people that were like, of course, I'll do it for you. Then I did my children, and that was good because they were like 5 and 7 at the time. So I took a photo, with my husband. We recorded the day in their lives. It was beautiful. Now I have a time capsule of what they were like when they were 5 and 7 and what they play with and their favorite toys then. But so then I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this properly, if I'm going to take this further, I need to develop like a protocol. I'm being a researcher and having traveled, they were researching for companies and always designing research protocols. I was, okay, these are the rules. These are the things that you need to record. I'm gonna recreate people's food. And how is that going to happen? If you touch a light switch or a tap, it doesn't matter. If you drive your car, I want your car keys, your chewing gum, your parking ticket, your sunglasses, making sure that people don't forget things. If you have a shower, you may come back to me. Oh, Paula, I brought my towel and my soap. And I'll be like, where is the shampoo? Where is your razor? Where is this and that and that and that? And then the space, I was like, okay, I need to give everybody the same space so the photos look consistent on a white background. So I work on an always Arctic white with the same photo lighting set and 2.70 meters by 4 to everyone. And I fit your life there. Either if you have a lot of things or not, the photo will look more sparse or more compact, but everybody gets the same space.
I love how it all came together with just a friend and her husband as a help to get it started, because looking at your photos, technically, they seem technically complicated because you've got quality of objects. Let's go into the sort of technical detail, because from our direction perspective, everything in your photos is properly lined up. It's got space around it. Like, you make chaos immaculately organized. I don't think anyone who produced their items would say, oh, my life was chaotic. But to make sense of these items, do you go by time of the day, or how do you do this? So my first question is, what sort of lens do you use? Do you have a rig that you've got?
Oh.
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Lux Coffee Co., the first creative specialty coffee company building a platform to shine the light on emerging global talent with a mission to make a positive impact on the creative industry and beyond. Lux Coffee Co. offers exceptional coffee sourced from around the world through ethical and sustainable practices, and you can discover the current range of signature blends and single origins, coffee hardware and accessories, along with exceptional apparel at luxcoffee.co.uk. You can use the code PODCAST to get 15% off your first order.
Got it here. It's the 1635, so that's the lens. And then I have a Canon 60. And I had the same camera since 2013 when I took the first photo. And I do travel with a background stand and an extension that is the most analog piece, but I travel with me, and then I hire the lights on the studios when I go away abroad. Yeah, that's the kit. It's quite basic. And then I connect my camera to either my phone or my computer through the Canon app, and I shoot from there, and I can control everything. But the way that you were saying about the building of the photo, so I have something that I cannot change, and it's the chronology of your day. So it has to go in the order of touching. So I can't put your towel before your soap. Well, things like that. So I'm kind of limited and constrained by how things go. But then I play with the photo as if they were paragraphs on a book. So my photos read from left to right, top to bottom, but I might create different paragraphs of lines of objects. So it will all sit perfectly on the same place. And then I have challenges like tall objects. Ideally, they will go in the center and not on the edges, because otherwise you'll see them if they were lying flat. A bit of a math problem. So I can't cheat with the order, but I have to work it so technically and visually. It's a bit of a puzzle, to be honest. Like when I'm there, each photo takes me 4.5 hours to make on the floor. And I'm wearing socks and leggings and a tight t-shirt, because even my clothes can move objects. So I'm kind of a bit of a ninja style, working on the floor doing the photo. I think if people say when a ripple on the lake settles, or it is chaotic, and or when the sea calms down, that I'm happy. And that's when the final shot takes place.
I'm loving the ninja moves. That is quite, that's definitely the experience. So you mentioned that your photos are like the paragraph, right? Reading from left to right. Do you have the reverse order for Arabic people? Obviously,
Interesting. No.
Do you do it in the same way?
No. But I have photographed.
You see, I was wondering if it's your rules or international rules.
It's interesting. No, I'm thinking because I have photographed. No, but no.
No, that's interesting. So With your post-production, and we'll talk more about the philosophy, but with your post-production, like how much of a retouching is involved? Is it a raw picture that you publish, or do you clean up things and do stuff?
I do clean up things. It's not a lot, but I do. And sometimes it will be like a shadow, or it's interesting because like things that roll, let's say a deodorant or a jar, I put blue tack to hold them in place. And sometimes I was just like end up, finding I'm cleaning up and I find like masking tape or blue tack or a string or something. And yes, so there is a little bit of making it like final, immaculate. But it's more to do with the paper than with the objects themselves.
I got it. So, from your compositions, obviously, you've been doing this for more than 10 years now. Do you look back at some of the compositions and do you wish you've changed them, or have you learned from practice? Do you?
Yes. Particularly in the beginning, because some of the ones in the beginnings, I look back at them and I like the story, but I don't like the photo. And because probably I wasn't appreciating all the details, probably at the beginning I was like more rushed to capture another story. And I don't like being rushed. And that's kind of one of the things but I have to, because this I'll do it in a photo studio. I might be in a city and I can photograph 2 people in a day. So I just have the studio for 8 hours and I need to work that way. And I'm also, it's people's lives, people's objects. There is a limit to how long can you hold somebody's dearest possessions. But I look back and I wish I put things straighter. I could go and retouch it with Photoshop, but I won't do that. It's done, it's that way.
With the stories that you've encountered, there's some absolute fantastic stories that you've captured, from cowboys to geishas to everyone in between, from 2-year-olds to older people. How did anyone get almost surprised with the amount of stuff that they touch on a daily basis? Or, is it a surprise, is it a celebration? How do people feel about it? Because it sounds like a thrilling project, but what's the feeling behind it?
But I didn't expect that as a result that people will go through their own experience. But I had people saying that they found the exercise really mindful in terms of stopping to think about things that you do daily that you don't think about. And this might be from photograph, for example, a gymnast that I photographed in Shanghai. He was realizing how many cigarettes and Red Bull and chocolate bars he had to get through the day to put up. He was like teaching kids. I don't know, like things like that, recount. My last photograph was recently a indigenous hunter in Taipei, outside of Taipei. In order to keep awake and alert when he goes hunting, he takes those, betel nuts. They're like a stimulant similar to cocaine plants, and they're natural. And that was part of the big story, realizing what are the things that you need to do. You need to do the things that you need to do, and put it down to coffee or maybe going for a walk, but just seeing everything in the context of how connected the things that you do are. You can see, again, new narratives. I had people realizing my life is more occupied with work than with fun, or my job is not represented on my photo. People that would look at their photo and they are this artist or graphic designer or everything, and their work is just a laptop or a computer. I'm feeling that story is not coming through. There are like so many levels of which you can discover.
It's fascinating because it says like a mindful approach, like a mindfulness, like we take a break from our lives. Because as we have touched on it earlier, like once upon a time, we were mostly mindful because there was nothing else to take our attention. Like we were kind of more in tune with what was happening around us, but we thought we were absolutely bored. Like this is a boring life. We were telling ourselves like, what is there more exciting? Whereas how often do you have as a regular human being time to actually step out and say, what does my life look like? Have I got everything in the house I need, or do I need to take stuff out, or I need to bring more in? We kind of make do with things, but we don't necessarily take a review or the inventory of our lives. We don't always take inventory of our lives. And my question is it a true expression of someone's life, or has anyone dialed up their day to make sure that they've got everything in the picture? For example, you don't always horse ride, you don't always paint, you don't always do things. Like, do you create a snapshot of your life, or do you give them a rule saying like, it's next Thursday, it's just a picture of your next Thursday?
I help them pick a day that is representative, not the day that, I don't know, you got married or the day that, and a day that is representative of your life, be it a weekend or a weekday, that's optional. But we attempt to surround ourselves with dream objects where we project that idea that we have of ourselves. It could be the books that we haven't read, or the guitar that we haven't learned to play, or the photo camera that we haven't picked, or things that you think that one day you'll use them. And sometimes we create an image in our minds of who we are. And sometimes when you have to limit that to actually what you really use, it's like when people say you are what you eat or you are what you do. So it projects a mirror back to you of what is it that you actually really do. So I think like by having that as a framework, if you are not a guitar player, it's rare that your guitar will be there, unless you are the type of person that in the evening just, grabs the guitar and plays a little bit. So yes, it tends to be defined by what you are actually doing.
I've got a question for you, actually, you, because you see this world from a totally different lens. You have to articulate other people, like, what does their day in life look like? Has your experience to new objects, textures, flavors changed? Because, for example, process of writing a book, when I work on a book every few years, I hear the world differently. I perceive it differently. Like, I'm trying to join the dots. And in your way, you must be thinking like, okay, today, I mean, maybe it's a second nature now, but has that experience of life changed for you through the eyes of other people?
Completely. And I think sometimes it's a bit like having muscle memory of things that are not my story. If I acquire muscle memory of other people's lives through the work that I do as my business, I travel the world, researching industries, topics. It would be like luxury or high-end fashion or banking. And I would immerse myself. I just came back from a big project on high-end luxury fashion in the Middle East. And now I have those lenses. I have the lens of what is being a person that is surrounded by high-end fashion luxury in the Middle East. And then last year, I was studying the future of sports in China, looking at emerging sports and emerging ways of moving. Or the one before, I was looking at how people look after their homes and take care of their homes in India. So all the time looking at life from that point of view to then come back with ideas for improvement or new products, services, brands. And I embrace all of that as my own. So I keep changing how I do things. I pick tips from different people, or I might like something that somebody else has. I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. I don't know. I kind of have like through that. I don't know if it sounds a bit silly, but different ways, different lenses on the most basic things. It will be like cooking, banking, or dressing up, things like that. That's my type of knowledge.
I think it's a fascinating concoction of experiences, because you might go to another place as a tourist, see it, take some experiences home, maybe one or two recipes, or find a flavor or something that you might want to recreate. Whereas not only in like faraway places, but you also get to really experience the life through research. You've got a purpose to ask them questions, to go deeper and join dots that you didn't even know existed in a way. Because what I wanted to know from what you do and how you do it, and you mentioned those words before, like mental health, and you mentioned other sort of feelings were connected to the items. How do you see, and this is a warning for potentially too big of a question, but how do you see the element of happiness and material possessions being connected together? Because I'm sure that the snapshot of people's lives is mostly the positive. This is what their celebration of life is. But is there a connection between happiness, materialism, mental health, and all of this? Because is there any link between it?
Good question. I think the first things that I will demystify is like sometimes people, and that's not what you're saying, but I know that I have been asked that in the past. People think that amount of items you may surround yourself with has to do with wealth or lack of. And I don't think that's a link. And I think that everybody needs stuff daily and will apply meaning to all the things they have. So I would talk about that in a kind of like more general lenses, removing it from any association of consumerism and wealth and happiness. I will remove that layer. I did a project during lockdown. I don't know if I mentioned it to you and it goes back to your question about mental health and things. So when lockdown started, as everybody, I found myself like, it was like musical chairs. In the moment that the music stopped, you found yourself where you were. And one of the things that I realized is like my life in terms of objects was changing. I was spending more time at home with all the uncertainty that that brought to us and also all the beauty of being able to spend more time at home. And I realized that I was reconnecting with objects in a different way. Things that, like I was, I don't know, making my own gym at home, playing records instead of listening to Spotify on the go, cooking more, etc. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sure people are starting to have different ways of connecting with their homes, with their environment as well. People, reshifting things in their homes. And I remember putting away plates and stuff that I had for guests, and they were taking space. I was like, well, no guests are going to come to my house for a while. I'm just going to move all of this. I want to just live with what I knew. So a lot of changes. And I was thinking, like, I want to document how this is happening in other people's homes and around the world. So unable to travel and unable to touch other people's objects, I put a call on social media. I took a photo of my new 15 essentials. And I was like, these are the objects that became essential to my life now. And I think they are reflecting my new habits and my hopes and fears, particularly. What about yours? What are your new essentials? So again, the protocol, not your toothbrush that you used, it was essential last month, but things that you are looking at it with new lens. And I created a hashtag that it was everything we touch COVID essentials 15, really long. And it traveled. So people started to share their life through this new 15 essential object. And I collected 1,000 photos from 50 different countries. And I created a public archive. It's called www.lockdownessentials.org. And you can go and see all the stories, because what people had to do as well was to take the photo of the 15 items and write a line per item explaining their choice. So you could go and see how was lockdown in Saudi or Brazil or India. You could access, or China, you could access archive. And it is amazing because apart from we were all in the same, experiencing the same thing. And you can also see how different societies were dealing with it differently. So, for example, in so many photos that I have, and it goes back to your question about happiness and coping and mental health. So, for example, in many photos that I have from Africa, one of the ways in which communities, deal with uncertainty or when something is not right, they will go to church together as a community. In the absence of that, my photos have a Zoom next to a computer next to a Bible. And that's the new church on Zoom or Facebook. Then a lot of photos from China had the scales as people were worrying women about putting on weight, or photo that I have from Ecuador, there are shamanic rituals, to cope with. But I'm just saying how much an object is telling you about society. But to go back to your original question about happiness, those photos reflect how we were coping. And if you look at all the photos and you look at what's common here, is how do I cope with this? So for some people will be like a pair of trainers to go for a run. Others will be alcohol, chocolate, mental health medications, game puzzles to keep my mind occupied, drawing mandalas. But that's interesting how there is always something there that we're looking out for help or to help us pass a moment in time.
Well, I missed your project during lockdown, but I'm thinking about what were my lockdown essentials. And one of them was an ironing board, not because of ironing, but because I used it as a makeshift laptop stand in my loft. There was nothing to use that. And I'm thinking M&Ms, and a ironing board. That was definitely...
Yeah, but how amazing. But just start, you can start something with that. What do M&Ms and an ironing board have in common?
Necessity, yeah. Yeah, the reason why I asked you about the number of items and versus happiness, because you said, quite interestingly, you said wealth, but I see it from a perspective of like, how do we find that shortcut to dopamine? Like how many people buy things for temporary value? It's something there. And it's usually the people who have got less available cash or they're less solvent, they would buy sometimes more stuff because that to them is the escapism out of the situation. Whereas I met some insanely wealthy people who very live the most minimalist life because to them the concept of other sort of personal issues behind some of this stuff. And I think it's a way of how you're working on this is there's no such thing as one template to decipher humanity because it's obviously the different countries, different continents, different generations. All of that stuff has a different possessions and different sort of feeling how we interact with it. So In one of your photos, you photographed your mum's possessions, and you said how beautiful that was, the difference between what she used to be working in finance, and now obviously she doesn't work in finance anymore. And she's got a rotary phone. She uses the phone to call herself on her iPhone because she uses it in the house. How was that for you?
It was super emotional because I haven't lived, well, I stopped living with my mom when I was 18, but I left Buenos Aires when I was 24. And, apart from me visiting, we haven't lived in the same house together. And when we look at, when you see everything, like somebody's frying pan, colander, tea towels, she was there in every single object, I photographed, but it was like opening a new lens into my mom's life, seeing all her makeup line up, seeing all her cute cooking utensils, the things she reads. She actually has CDs, so the CDs that she listens to. And also, I photographed my mom at the age of 64. And when I was living with her, she was 35, and she used to wear pencil skirts and makeup and dress in high-end fashion to go to work, dressing really smart. And nowadays, you find her going to Pilates, making birth charts, and it's a complete different person. It's not a different person. What I mean, her lifestyle is different, and that's reflected on the objects. And I love her photo. I think it's a really nice way of photographing your loved ones by their possessions. And I see them. They're not on the photo. But one time I was on a talk and then somebody laughed and put it as a hashtag or something. And I was like, they're right. I'm not thinking about it. But I went like, here is a photo of my mom. And I started talking. People were laughing. Then here is a photo of my mom. She wasn't there. Those are her objects. But that's how I view it.
That's a beautiful way of encapsulating the memories and feelings, because in one of your promo videos that you created, I think it was the cowboy who said, you can tell how people feel by everything they touch. That is so profound, because when we see people on the surface level passing by public transport, you don't necessarily think about the deeper stories. Once upon a time, we used to do coming back from a night out at 5 o'clock in the morning, you sit down somewhere because you're tired. You're like, I wonder where that person's going. I wonder why this person's awake. I'm like, oh, they must be thinking, why the hell are you not in bed yet? But at least you try to get into other people's worlds, because most of the time we are just, for most of our lives, we have just been worried what other people might think of us. Am I wearing the right stuff? Am I doing this? And that insecurities. Whereas in your way, what was the thing that you were most surprised to learn through all of this project?
I don't know if it's one thing, but it's everything. It's just seeing how other people live, and not in a nosy way, in a kind of humble way that no life is better than others. Everyone is a story. And just to find stories in the everyday, in people's lives. And what surprised me is like when I look at a photo and I find new narratives, new ways of looking at it. So I run filters in my head, and I may find that objects connect, or that there is a pattern, or I get excited by those things. I get excited by saying, oh, what happens if I remove the middle line? Will that person still be showing their story or not? I get fascinated by asking questions that I'm not allowed to ask in any other way. If you give me all your objects, I can straight ask you, oh, Radim, where's this coming from? Who bought you this? Did you buy this yourself, or is this coming from somewhere else? I was photographing a teacher in the Arab border of East Jerusalem, and she gave me the praying rug and the coffee and the cigarettes all together. And I was like, oh, what goes first? And she said, first God, then the cigarettes and the coffee. And I was like, okay, why first God? Questions like that. And then you enter a very amazing conversation with somebody about that probably, I can't ask somebody on the street walking, why first God?
Well, hang out with me for a few minutes and you will see what I do. Now in public, one of the first discoveries that I got through podcasting is how equal we are in life and creativity. Like we see people from, let's say, an experienced lens, thinking, oh, some people are higher, or they are further, or they're on different they're placed on the axis of life and success differently. Whereas we are all on the same level playing field. Some of us have already walked maybe a little bit further, but we are walking the same axis. There's no such thing as up. And it's a satisfying feeling to hear other people's stories. And satisfying is the reason why, because I personally believe like our industry or even life is based on a little bit of ego, a bit ambition, but then insecurity and anxiety. Like we don't always have this sort of leveled. So when you actually open yourself to other people's stories, it makes your story feel so much more validated because you realize I'm living my life. And the more I put myself in the life of others, I get to hear more about myself. I've got more to learn about myself. So what I want to know before I let you go is, in my concept of daring creativity, daring forever, it's a project that I think you would regret never starting because it's your kind of life's work. I want to know, for those that might be considering something similar when they stumble over it or when they find it in their lives, like, how do you keep going? How do you self-fund it? How do you propel yourself going forward? How do you find more people? Because am I right that you're going to be doing this for a while yet?
Yes, I didn't think, the first time I did it, I started it, like I told you, with my first 2 photographs. And I was really lucky after the 2 photos to be talking to Penguin as a publisher. And I had a meeting and the project was like, oh, this is amazing. It took a while and they rejected it. And then I had the opportunity to be talking to Penguin again 6 months later. And they were like, oh, it's amazing. You got a book here. But in between those 2, the first time I only had 2 photos. So when Penguin rejected me, it was like, this is an amazing idea, but you got a concept. You don't have a book. And I was like, okay, fine. So I went away and I was like, why am I waiting for Penguin to tell me that I can do this project? So I was like, this is actually the kick that I need. Why am I waiting? I waited 6 months to hear that. I was like, no, I'm going to make my own photos. So then I started to photograph. Then that's when I photographed my children and I started photographing different people to not have my tree. You always, like when your aunt and your granny are your case study. No, like I had to go wider. So by the time that I got talking to Penguin again, I had 8 photos and they were like really strong. So I had the opportunity of publishing my first book with them. And so I kind of had a deadline. I had 8 months to produce 60 photographs that were of a global scale for the book. So my first 60 were driven by incredible desire to make a book, enthusiasm to find the best stories out there, and the desire to make it like the most diverse and inclusive as I could, so the book could speak to everyone. So the funding of my first 60 was through the book deal. So with the advance of the book, I was able to fund it, which was an important consideration I had when I was talking to Penguin at the time, because that was essential for me to do it. So that's how we started. But then after the book got published, I carry on with my own business. And then people started to contact me because of the book. So I started to get commissions from brands, like the one you see on my wall is an ad for Skoda that I did. And, started to get commissions and things to do projects related to that, or invited on festivals around the world to photograph people. So while not fully funded, a lot of opportunities came around to be able to take my set and set up, like I did Israel, I did the UAE, and then whenever I was traveling somewhere for work, I will get a cheeky day at the end where I could do my photos. So it's always kind of like finding the way. Now I got more than 100. So it's always kind of like finding that gap. So the real photos nowadays are self-funded. And that's what I do as much as I can. But whenever I go to a new place, I look for a story. And I think it's a bit of a journalistic approach. And I tell you, I photographed the indigenous hunter. And that inspired me to now take photos of indigenous communities because of how so much wisdom is trapped in the objects that they use every day. I also photograph in Taiwan, Chinese traditional medicine person, because I wanted to learn about that. And the photo is fascinating. It's full of dry seahorses and toads and all the things that have to do with Chinese medicine. So, yes, so it is about finding ways to self-fund, not big ambitious, like I do it as I can. Nobody's rushing me on that one. It's my own self wanting to do my research and artwork. I sometimes get to do exhibitions or something, and then I will destine that towards making those photos.
I love what you do. I love how you do it. And I think You have to dig out bones from the ground to find out what was happening back in the past. Whereas you're documenting everything for us. Showing how the life works from 2-year-olds to, 90-year-olds. And it's fascinating, I think, especially what you mentioned about the indigenous people. I mean, that's still so much unknown that they could be unearthed on that.
To give you a quote on that, indigenous people say that particularly in Latin America, South American communities, that your future is on your back and your past is on the front. So what you carry, what you are seeing is your past. That's the only thing that you can see. And what you have behind is the future. That is what you cannot see. So I want to see, that in objects.
I like it. I like it a lot. So, parting question. Is there a person that you wish you have documented their lives?
Well, actually, my grandmothers could have been good ones, because I would have learned a lot through them. And I don't think just because of fact of moving countries and then not being around, they passed away more than 20 years ago. I don't have their things. I don't have stuff. I have the memory, which is more valuable than anything. And I'm not losing that. But it would be good to have had that story.
What a beautiful answer. What a beautiful answer, because I was thinking, is there someone famous? No, it's the grandma.
Yeah.
Paula, thank you very much for your time today. I mean, what a beautiful story. I find it fascinating. I got to learn about your world recently, and I can't wait to see what else you produce. And I'm so excited for you because it's informed how you live, how you work, and what you bring into the world. And it's singular, it's unique, and I celebrate you for that.
I thank you so much. I mean, I'm really grateful for the opportunity of talking to you, and also your questions got me thinking about new answers, new stuff. And, you also connected dots for me that I haven't seen. So I'm really grateful for this.
Fascinating. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Daring Creativity Podcast. I'd love to know your thoughts, questions, and suggestions. So please get in touch via the email in the show notes or social channels. This episode was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinic. The audio production was done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bags Podcast. Thank you, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more accessible resources to help you discover your daring creativity, you can pick up one of my books on themes of mindful creativity, creative business, branding, and graphic design. Every physical book purchase comes with a free digital bundle including an ebook and audiobook to make the content accessible wherever you are and whatever you do. To get 10% of your order, visit novemberuniverse.co.uk and use the code PODCAST. Have a look around and start living daringly.